Okay, I am absolutely sick and dying with a cold, so this is going to be interesting. But I just really wanted to make a video on Heartstopper before the third season comes out and see how my commentary on the first two seasons does in retrospect. This is, I think, my third attempt at making a video trying to explain why I don't like this show because I found it difficult to criticize. A lot of critiques of this show can be rebutted with this conviction that it's your problem if you think that the scenes that involve Nick speaking French are completely unwatchable. Just this trying to portray him as being humble about his fluency with these over-the-top reactions from his peers and this complete obliviousness on his end about why someone might be impressed or surprised to just hear him just spew French suddenly. Like, if you have this criticism, if you say that the scenes that involve Nick speaking French are totally unwatchable, then it's your problem because you are missing the point, and the actual point is kind of about the fantasy of having a nice boyfriend who can speak a nice, attractive language or something, I don't know. And so then you're like, okay, I guess it was good then.
Did I ever tell you about my friend who spent a summer in France? In France, everything was better. The art house films, the fashion, the croissants. She said it just like that. Croissant. Who does that?
I'll pack you a croissant.
Croissant?
Art has a lot of different purposes, and Heartstopper has a lot of different parts that accomplish different things. And so I feel like this argument can always be made that you're missing the point and that your criticism is not pertinent to what the show was actually trying to accomplish. So whatever, I really don't want to make a video that is to say that Heartstopper is bad. I just want to make a video expressing a few points in which I have disdain for the show. That might be a truth about all media criticism, but I felt a need to say that at the outset. I honestly think that there was a lot of creativity and hard work and talent that was put into this piece, and I really think that the producers deserve a lot of grace for how much they stuck their hand into the tiger pit here and how well they did in that tiger pit. I definitely couldn't have pulled off everything that they did.
I pet my dog. You see, petting your dog is one of the most relaxing things you can possibly do.
Okay, so what did I mean about the tiger pit? There's just a lot to be said about this show inside of it trying to be every freaking thing under the sun. It's also an LGBTQIA plus kind of romance show that takes place in high school, and lots of people reserve pretty strong feelings about high school, and so audiences might be more keen to hold the show to a higher standard and more eagerly criticize it. So for example, there's this take that I've heard amounting to sort of Love, Simon is queer media for straight people or something. This take can really easily become a vehicle for some really unwarranted gatekeeping. Queer media is not a limited resource that only certain demographics are entitled to consume, and so this sort of take has put people into some really uncomfortable positions with this moral obligation to be of a sexual minority or something in order to create and consume this content. Because, like, if you're a straight woman who likes Heartstopper, then that would be bad, right? Well, I don't think so. These romance stories among same-gendered couples are popular among straight women in no small part because men are still kind of thought of as stoic and dominant, and women are still conceptually subservient and objects of desire. So there's something kind of captivating and thrilling and taboo about two men being sweet and caring for each other, and women who find agency and belonging in one another. Also, sexual minorities are still marginalized, and so they have to overcome a few extra barriers than do their heterosexual counterparts who enjoy the luxury of kind of being the default. There's more of a fight toward this end, and that is indicative of more desire, and that is really what we want from media, isn't it? We want to visualize festering, agonizing desire, because that makes it all the more satisfying when the ship becomes canon or whatever. So I really don't think that queer media belongs to any group in particular, but my primary complaint about Heartstopper is that it is a piece of queer media that exists for the purpose of being queer media. I would really like to think that the characters in this show get to have a life beyond their sexualities, and there are things in this show that don't lend themselves to those sorts of ends on its face, but they do indirectly. Consider, I guess, in season 1, the main character is Charlie, and he is in a friend group with borderline outcasts.
Look at them. Look at us. We are a trio of borderline outcasts. He is the star player on the rugby team.
Okay.
So Charlie's water buffalo friend, Tao, gets all possessive and protective of Charlie when Charlie is in Nick's proximity. And inconveniently, Tao does not know that Charlie and Nick are actually romantic with each other. And you could argue that Tao, and therefore the text, makes a prominent theme out of friendship, since Tao feels this need to protect Charlie. But actually, Tao's possessiveness of Charlie is attributable to Charlie being bullied in the previous school year for being gay. So the concept of friendship is invoked by this, but it's just another thing that revolves around sexuality. And that's basically how most things in this show are. Okay, so while season 2 was on its way, there was this date announcement that was kind of anticipating some differences between the two seasons.
All going on nicely. We might expect Imogen to start taking care of herself a bit more and put herself above boys.
Yeah, there's just so many things that happen with Elle this season that you're not ready for. I would say Elle is different in the sense that she's more confident. She surrounds herself with people that elevate her.
Alice has got some amazing scripts for us. It also feels like, cool and fresh. It's a different vibe to season 1.
Yeah, so for me, there was not that much more going on. It was not cool and fresh and a different vibe from season 1, and there were not all that many things that I was not ready for. So I guess that it introduced some more mature concepts, but they all just went to this same end of wrestling with coming out or combating bigotry or romance drama. By the way, Tao's sort of clinginess in the second season is attributed to something else. He is wistful for his friend Elle, who used to go to school with him, Charlie, and also Isaac, but she moved to another school because she is a trans woman. She gets to go to the girls' school, and then she's probably going to go to another school further away after she's done with this year. I think it's her last year of secondary school. I don't know if British people call it that. And so Tao is sitting in his room and kind of longing for her, and then it becomes revealed to us that Tao's father died.
You remind me of me and Dad.
What? Mom, that's so weird.
Well, he was the calm one, and I was the outspoken one. But when we were in the same room, it was like perfect harmony. And no matter what happened, we'd both be okay. So when we lost him, I felt so unbalanced. It was like falling off a cliff.
Yeah, so that's what is attributed to his sort of protective nature. And of course, Tao's father dying is a feature of the show that does nothing and goes nowhere. It's more like Tao's longing for Elle is what gets the plot points.
My dad died when I was 12, and, I think a lot of the reason I get so freaked out about losing my friends and losing Elle.
Charlie restricts his eating on account of...
Some days I'm fine, but other days I feel like I need to control it. I used to do it a lot last year, and everything at school was really bad. Sometimes it feels like the only thing I can control in my life.
It's not unrealistic for a person to restrict their eating as a means of sort of coping with and controlling a world that has been made more forbidding by being out as a gay person and being bullied for it. But it seems like being a sexual minority or romance drama or something is the only thing that can be culpable for these more mature plot points that exist for these characters. Charlie reveals that he also used to self-harm, and that's attributable to being out as a gay person. Nick experiences some symptoms of anxiety as he tries to come out to his friends. He also might have test anxiety here after he... Okay, so this is Imogen, and she is friends with Nick, and this is Ben, who's kind of a bad guy in this show because he had kind of been having romantic meetups with Charlie before Charlie got involved with Nick, and then Charlie eventually dumps him, and Ben kind of lashes out by kind of assaulting Charlie. There's also another couple, Tara and Darcy, and the show depicts substance use, I guess. I actually love this part of the show when the students just all ran to the teachers when Darcy was about to get sick, as if the teachers would do anything to help. I don't know, you would think that they would just like stay in their room and like get sick in the bathroom or something and even conceal that they had been drinking. But I guess if they had stayed in the room, then Darcy wouldn't have gotten sick on Mr. Ajayi's bed, and then Mr. Ajayi wouldn't be like,
"Oh no! I can't drink this now."
And then Mr. Farouk wouldn't say, well, maybe you could sleep in my bed. And then they wouldn't have probably intercourse next to the vomit. Also, we get a taste of a lesbophobic parent and Darcy getting kicked out of her house because she looked like a lesbian for a second there. That conflict kind of evaporates away after this scene where Darcy and Tara kind of talk about Darcy's problem at home. And so that makes this farewell a little bit of a mystery. Where's Darcy going? Like, is she going to go back home? Or, well, I guess it's no matter in sight of how cute these snuggle bugs are. It's the last time we see Darcy in this season, but I guess the real cliffhanger here is whether Charlie is going to send his I love you text to Nick. I stand by what I said. Queer media is fine and it belongs to everyone, but I just think that it's a shame that these people don't get to have a life outside of their sexualities. And that, compounded with just how exhibitionistic this show is just really unnerving to me. I guess I mentioned the I love you text a moment ago. Another conflict that comes up in this show concerns Tara telling Darcy that she loves her and Darcy not saying it back. It actually gets explained in this scene that Darcy didn't tell Tara that she loved her back because she is not really accepted at home, and that makes identity and therefore commitment kind of difficult for her. It felt like the show was saying,
"Now hold on just a minute, young fellow. There's a perfectly good explanation for all of this."
As though it would have been wrong for Darcy not to tell Tara that she loved her back simply because she wasn't ready to say that yet. You know, it wouldn't be fair to either person in a relationship if one of them said I love you without meaning it. And if one person isn't ready to say it yet, that's not to say that they never will. I initially thought that the show was going to convey something to that effect, but oh boy did it fly wildly in the other direction. It's not bad to portray someone who doesn't say that back because they're kind of dealing with problems at home, but it also wouldn't be bad if they just weren't ready to say it yet, right?
It's hard to get to open up. I said I love you to her last week, and she didn't say it back. Like, maybe she didn't even want to.
I'm sure she does want to.
I don't know. There's a similar weird thing in this show about being out in general. So people who have claimed an identity as a sexual minority might encounter this kind of bigoted sentiment of
מה אתה מנסה להוכיח בכל המשחקים האלה שלך?
איזה משחקים?
אל תתמם, מאז שיצאתם מהארון בכל הזדמנות אתה רק מנסה לדחוף לי את זה מול הפרצוף, רועי.
ומה בזה שאני מביא את חבר שלי לארוחת שישי?
זה לא קשור לחבר שלך. תתפלא אולי לשמוע, אבל אני למדתי לחיות עם הבחירה שלך.
טוב, אמא, זאת לא בחירה.
תגיד לי, מתי ייגמר כל הנפנוף דגלים הזה שלך?
לא ייגמר.
It's a frustrating thing to hear because usually this is said when same-gendered couples are just living their lives like a heterosexual couple would. So I did not enjoy the parts where I became Michael Olani's mother when Heartstopper would cross this really weird line out of like, it's taxing to conceal our relationship into I want to tell everyone that we are together, and since I'm not able to, our relationship doesn't feel legitimate or something.
I guess part of me just wants everyone to know you're my boyfriend.
He probably wants to be something more than secret guy you kiss sometimes on the down low. And if you can't give him more than that, then, I mean, that's fine, but it's always going to make him feel a little bit crap about himself.
Now we're gonna tell people?
Yeah.
So we're gonna go to prom and we're gonna be the cutest couple there and everyone will see.
Nick coming out is this anticipated event that each season sort of builds up to. In the first season, he comes out to his mother, and then in the second season, he's supposed to go with Charlie to this Summer of Love prom.
We're celebrating a summer of love. So make sure to dance, have fun, and show off your date to the world.
Alright.
It kind of jives weird in this piece that supposedly wants Nick to come out when he's ready. I also don't know how any of this show jives with Isaac's ace identity. I didn't think that sex education handled asexuality as a concept particularly great, but there was this part that some asexual people liked.
Sex just doesn't do it for some people.
But I still want to fall in love.
Well, some asexual people still want romantic relationships, but they don't want the sex bit. And others don't want either. You know, sexuality is fluid. Sex doesn't make us whole. And so, how could you ever be broken?
Okay, and I guess Stanley Squarepants, who okay, so this is James, and he kind of crushes on Isaac and kisses him later, and Isaac's not into it, and the show goes like,
I think there might be something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. You probably just haven't found the right person yet.
Yeah.
and this was to kind of indicate how an allo person can kind of misunderstand ace people and therefore be inadvertently insensitive. So good on Heartstopper for portraying that struggle bus. And then Isaac returns to his friends and yells at them. This part kind of felt like a PSA about how asexual people exist, and it was just like wedged in to appease every letter of the acronym. This part was not very consistent with the show's internal logic. The vast majority of this show kind of plays on this premise that romance does fix us and that our sexualities do make us whole. It doesn't really make room for Isaac, which, you know, it's not obligated to do, but if it's going to oblige itself, then it could maybe do something a little less bizarre than having him react to the concept of asexuality in the same way that his allo counterparts just react to romance. Isaac feels romantic for the concept of an aromantic identity. I didn't like how this show handled bigotry and its antagonists. I mentioned Ben earlier, who likes Charlie but is super uncomfortable with the part of him that likes Charlie, so he's actually demeaning to Charlie. Harry is the kind of person to think that simply saying the word gay is enough to constitute a joke, and he's a pretty accurate representation, I thought, of the kind of bully to get away with their behavior with this plausible deniability claim that he was just joking. He seems very invulnerable and afraid to admit when he is wrong, so he may even be in denial about his own behavior and the ramifications of it. But in the second season, Harry wants to go to Tara's birthday party for some reason, and he admits that he had been homophobic in the past and promises not to say any of that sort of offensive stuff anymore. And some YouTube comment, I think, said something like they were happy that Harry got the door slammed in his face because the main cast doesn't really owe him anything, which I agreed with. In the second season, Ben apologizes to Charlie, and he does so in this weird way where he's kind of half smiling, and it's pretty clear that Ben just wants Charlie to say that it's okay and suddenly dump Nick or something and get back with him. That doesn't happen, of course, and Charlie rejects his apology for like a full minute. We don't get to see that much of Darcy's mother, but she appears in the last 2 episodes of the second season where she's kicking Darcy out of the house because she looked like a lesbian, and then in the last episode where she's just telling Tara, who to her is just a complete stranger, about how she looked like a lesbian and left the house.
Thanks, Ted. Bye.
I like to think that Darcy's mother was specifically lesbophobic so that we would have a kind of bigot for the L's, the G's, and the B's, with Nick's brother David being specifically biphobic. Also, I got the sense that David's parents don't like him very much.
Make me one.
Not if you ask like that, David.
As I can. My job, it keeps me very busy. I'm in property development.
You should see some of the places Dad renovates. Insane.
Work isn't everything, you know.
David's sort of takedown was when Charlie's sister Tori kicked the phone out of his hand and then threatened to end him. The show very clearly intends for us to enjoy these takedowns, and I find that gross. The show does a lot of framing these people as subjects that we are supposed to hate, and yet it has very little to say about the underlying causes of bigotry or anything productive like that. Wouldn't that be a more sincere rejection of the Testament? To properly grasp those lines of thinking and employ imagination and empathy and reject that sort of thinking for the incorrect rubbish that it is. Harry and Ben only got punished when shards of light began to show in their character, and I think that it would have been more satisfying if the show actually had something to say about the kinds of thought processes that a person can go through to fully admit to themselves that they were behaving poorly. I think that it would have been more esteemable of the protagonist to just say, "Thank you for apologizing, I still want this to be goodbye." So I did enjoy a few things about this show. A lot of things, actually. It's going to take up like the rest of this video, and we're not very close to the end, so I think that there was a good amount of representation along the lines of sexuality, race, and ethnicity without portraying like way too many characters for an audience to remember or care about. It can be kind of discouraging sometimes when you don't find people who resemble you in queer media, a genre that is kind of specifically designed to represent minorities. So good on Heartstopper for having a pretty diverse main cast. I liked when Charlie referred to his can-do attitude with a feminine pronoun.
Where is your can-do attitude?
Oh, she left long ago.
Just try, tackle me, I won't.
I did not think that it was one of the coolest things I had ever seen when Imogen dumped Ben in this big scene in a restaurant and flustered Ben and made him get laughed out of the restaurant. It was supposed to be like another thing that we were supposed to enjoy, I think, but I did like the fact that James was eating the entire time through that scene. Definitely my favorite acting choice in this entire show. So I complained earlier about how this show doesn't have very much development for people aside from their sexualities and stuff, but it was still pretty good at making you feel like the universe was real and developed and everything. Like, wow, we get to know that this guy's name is Christian, and we get to know that Tao might be a receptive bilingual, that is, his mother seems to speak to him in Cantonese, I think, and he responds in English. I think that it's also cool of the show to portray Nick and Charlie kind of adopting each other's behavior and socializing one another. Charlie says, "Why are we like this?" because Nick said that earlier.
Why are we like this?
Why are we like this?
To be honest.
Why are we like this?
And Nick kind of adopts the way Charlie waves. I think that it's nifty that we get to know what Elle's favorite movie is. I found this part interesting, that the show went through the trouble of specifying that Elle's favorite movie is Moonrise Kingdom, and having Elle kind of be visibly annoyed at Tao's criticisms.
I mean, it all hinges on the romance between the two kids, which is so unbelievable anyway, because they meet and fall in love immediately. And, like, they're kids, so obviously it's not going to last long term.
I think that the show was doing this for a reason, and I have a theory. So Moonrise Kingdom is kind of about a couple of eccentric 12-year-olds who run away and go on this kind of romantic camping trip together, and they kind of weren't supposed to run away. So they get in trouble for what they had done, and they get separated, and they engage in this really big, bombastic fight to stay together. My theory is that Elle likes this movie because as a trans woman in the UK, she probably knows a thing or two about fights for autonomy. Romance and identity have a lot of overlap with each other, and there's a case to be made that Moonrise Kingdom is an allegory for self-determination as a necessity that warrants this big bombastic fight. Also, as it pertains to identity and self-determination, I think that there is something to be said about the innocence in Moonrise Kingdom. Tao says that they're just kids, so obviously it's not going to last, but the fact that they are just kids is what makes the movie so romantic. As 12-year-olds, they don't have as much inhibition and they're less acquainted with the world than fully formed adults. All of their actions are guided by intuition and desire. You know, even when people are fully grown up and everything, every moment has its own logic, and to have that logic be denied by an authority or something is distressing, and it can put a person in even more danger than just allowing that person to follow that logic. These are very much sentiments that pertain to trans people and maybe not as much to a cis-het man. Elle was probably annoyed by Tao's criticism because Tao was kind of missing the point of the movie and criticizing it in bad faith. So I think that it was cool of Heartstopper to specify Moonrise Kingdom. I think that there are a few little sorts of Easter eggs in this show that are fun to find or whatever. Tao's name literally means balance, and I think that it can be argued that Tao's sort of journey as a character in this show is about finding a good balance between having close friendships and respecting his friends for whatever decisions they make, regardless of his proximity to those trajectories.
So when we lost him, I felt so unbalanced.
I think that another Easter egg was here in the Louvre where Elle fixates on this painting, and the show even goes through the trouble of showing us the painting that Elle is fixating on. Heartstopper probably wouldn't have done that if it didn't have a painting to specify, much less a painting that is not even in the Louvre. So I found a video on this painting that I thought was informative. So basically the theme of this painting is blessed are some of these sorts of mundane and modest situations. My theory is that Elle sort of picks up on this theme and has an almost religious experience with how happy she is to be in this museum with all of this art, even though she thought that this trip was going to be awful. The actual painter, Caravaggio, was speculated to not be straight. The actual category of like a gay person did not exist during his lifetime, but he's still a bit of a gay icon today in sight of just how into painting other men he was, specifically John the Baptist. There's also a Reddit post pointing out how in Universe Elle may have derived some inspiration from Caravaggio's Supper at Imes when she was making that piece that got the big speech and reveal for no reason at the Here in Queer art exhibition. Elle being in the place of androgynous, jarringly beardless Jesus. I think that it was nifty of the show to depict Elle as just being a trans woman and not really portraying any dysphoria or crises of sexuality with Tao. I'm not opposed to media that chooses to portray any dysphoria, or media that kind of looks into the logic that gender assignment at birth doesn't really dictate the sexuality of a person that is attracted to another person. You know, like, of course, a gay man is not going to be attracted to Elle. Like, I'm not opposed to media that chooses to do this, but I liked what Heartstopper did by choosing to omit it and having Elle just be a woman. So one of my pet peeves is when people kind of make assumptions about another person's sexuality before they've said a freaking word about ever being attracted to anyone. And it's always refreshing to see people be wrong in those sorts of assumptions. The show made a little bit of a thing out of portraying that men who portray meticulously masculine still have a capacity to not be straight. So that was nice. Of course, the fact remains that Kit Connor's casting decision as Nick was influenced by Kit Connor's capacity to pass authentically, that is, as not straight. So I actually don't know how meaningful this point of praise is. I've heard this criticism that the show is unnatural or unrealistic or something with how it refrains from portraying anything sexually explicit. I actually really liked that about the show. It's a nice show that you can watch while eating, you know, which isn't very common in queer media. Of course, I do know that the third season is going to portray I found this headline while I was trying to find the other article that I just cited. So I guess this innocence thing that I liked about the show will only pertain to the first 2 seasons. Another criticism that I've heard is that the show has like this super overdeveloped, devoid of conflict dialogue that is sort of unrealistic. I think that these people were expecting more drama and frustration in these sorts of relationships, and so the actual viewing experience turned out to be underwhelming for them. Well, I just want to say that I personally have absolutely no problem with healthy communication being portrayed in fiction, but if misunderstandings and drama are your trash, then I guess it would make sense that you wouldn't like this show. I think that was basically all of the things that I liked about this show. It was not a short list. There are lots of things about the show that I like, and the show was fine. There were many creative choices and choices that were indicative of development and hard work, but it's the very bones of the show that I have a problem with. I hope that this show ages poorly, and I am looking forward to hate watching the third season in a few weeks.